And the social ramifications of the criminalization of marijuana is pretty well known. I mean, recreational users are thrown in jail willy-nilly. And you look at countries that have taken sensible policies, like Poland, which legalized it, you saw that consumption there actually drop. And right now, states in the US, and Uruguay and South America, they're moving towards this legalization. And accepting marijuana is not only fun, but it's good business. I mean, looking at the economics of it, I recently read that Colorado's experiencing a boost in its tax revenues. I mean, America needs every dollar it could get right now. So, and the war on drugs has been a very costly initiative, and you know, perhaps people are saying we might be better off treating it as a public health issue. To speak to you guys on this very important matter, we have from Jamaica Dr. Kadamawi. If you're looking for him, he's not in a suit. Yeah, his accent though. So he has a PhD in sustainable development from the University of Surrey in England. He did his bachelor's and master's there as well. And I mean, he looks like a thug, but I can tell you his CV here is very impressive. He was a lecturer in strategic management and planning at the UE. He's head of the Office of Social Entrepreneurship. He's the general manager of JN Foundation, and he's a really bright guy. So, we'd like to invite Dr. Kadamawi to take this place.
I'm early, I'm not the GM of Jamaica National. I'm correct early. Jamaica National is actually an institution. Check the institution. I think its origin dates back into enslavement. Certain part of the organization. However, we do a lot of work in the social entrepreneurship field, in which Jay is one of the persons who have what's called a social entrepreneurship program to support. Alright. Let me read it on the Student Association, the university itself, the Rastafari youth group Rise. You know, most of all the family in the Caribbean, which are Guyanese. And you must realize when you look at the room and see at the multiplicity of the ethnicity of the members, it shows what and where your real strategic advantage lies. One strategic advantage lies within its people, not in government, but in people. And in my era of entrepreneurship, where entrepreneurship is defined as a process of creating value by bringing together a unique set of resources in order to exploit an opportunity. It is built upon two things, innovation and creativity. Innovation and creativity is driven by diversity. There is no way a diverse population can be a problem. It should be an advantage. And whoever, whether politicians or private sector people are causing a divide amongst the people, they are really betrayers to their own ancestors. Creating division amongst people is not the way of people of where sun shines. That's the way of people who do not know sun and complain about cold. Essentially, that's the way of Euro-American socialization. We need to start following our own parents and stop following persons who once enslaved us. But the presentation is about slavery and enslavement. It's really about a plan that actually aids in the liberation of one's mind, but not only one's mind, but also your pockets as well. Given my own bias as Rastafari, I think it is extremely important that a person get access to the information outside of my own source. So there are things that you might question if I should say them, but again, people are used to getting information from external sources and are quicker to believe those information. Nonetheless, these are the persons who are engaged in the research. And so for the next 40 minutes, I want us to sit and look at a documentary which speaks to the whole science behind the plant itself. It will touch on the social issues as well, but most importantly, it will speak to the science first and the medical use of. Bear in mind though, that in the presentation, my focus will not be on the use of medical marijuana. Certainly not on the use of smoking herb, because you know that anybody who wants herbs to smoke can get herbs to smoke regardless of where you are in the Caribbean. The only thing you need to do is have money to purchase it, because the price varies from places to places, especially if you're not a planter. You suffer the consequences of paying an extremely high price for that product. You know? Just good that I know planters everywhere I go, so I can get it without that kind of price. But it shows in the value. So it's not about smoking, because we can always smoke. It is certainly about medical marijuana for those who are engaged in the idea of the business, especially in economics. Medical marijuana, at best can only be what is called an import substitution strategy for the Caribbean. For the simple fact that the leading researchers in medical marijuana has been Israel. I want to know that Israel is really the child of the United States. So technically speaking, the leading researcher in medical marijuana has been the United States. From early as 1965, they had identified THC as an active cannabinoid in marijuana, in Ganja. Yes? So if you think about the business, who then will invest 50 years of investment in research and just allow anybody to develop products and enter into their market space as well? This is not about politics, it's about economics. And therefore in economics, it would not make any sense that the United States allow medical marijuana products to leave from the Caribbean to enter into the United States until they have recovered their expenditure which have been done over the last 50 years. And I'm not seeing that happening right now. So a lot of people trying to get caught in the discussion about medical marijuana. I don't know why. Because a lot of person in the region grow up here that when you smoke herbs you get your money. Well, we'll see from the documentary how herbs is being used to treat psychosis in England. Yeah. Through CBD. I mean, information is there, but still remember that we are Rastafari people, so we still have biases. You know? So the information, let the information drive you. So I'm saying it's not about smoking, and for me it's not about medical marijuana. 25 million people, of course you can deal with 25 million people. However, if you are planning to make an industry of medical marijuana, it means that you're planning to have your people sick around here because only sick people take medicine. My aim is not to have medical marijuana industry in the Caribbean because I don't want anybody around here to be sick. So that is the objective. So in the medium term it can be something that we look at. In the long run it should not exist. In the long run people should be able to actually create their own medicines from the plant. Because technically speaking, most of the medical marijuana is done through what? Putting herbs in a solvent, usually something like alcohol and taking all the actives. Our grandparents have been doing that for years. They are putting ganja in a bottle with rum and putting pimento seasoning and use it as well. So we go into a lab to do some of those things. Even though there are areas of interest. But the point I'm making is that we need to think about the other areas, the other industrial uses where persons do not have control over, just as we have control of medical marijuana areas. So we need to think about this in a real way. And think about it in what is called the agro-industry. Ganja is a plant. It's a plant. And then look at the data for Guyana. And the data for Guyana suggests that about 20% of the GDP comes from agriculture. Yes? Now, you look at the amount of land that is there in Guyana. Your water secure, your food secure, there's no shortage of lands, you have minor lands that we need to resuscitate. I was suggesting to the Virgin, so we need to look at the low carbon development strategy and say, how is that hemp production will support and complement the low carbon development strategy? And the Virgin said, well, why people might laugh at it. Of course, people might laugh at them do not know. You can't blame somebody for laughing in ignorance, they just don't know. The question is for those who know what will they be doing. Yes? So we need to look at it in that broad perspective. And ganja will not be legalized right now, you know. So give me a about 35% of the Guyanese population below the poverty line. What's that we are going to do now before they start to legalize ganja? Look at agriculture. The only source of wealth is land. I mean, as I Selassie argue that only when a country has established a solid agricultural base can look towards the future with confidence. Land, stop, make. Yes, I know I'm facing the audience. So Pasha, I talk to Pasha Virgin now, who's also a team on the Cape Entrepreneurship Program. The government of Guyana must know that they should not be selling any more land to any non-Caribbean persons. I mean, it's something that has to be done. Because I look at what's happening in Guyana, one of the highest industrial growth rate in the world, number 4 in the world. Yes, they have one of the lowest reserve, net international reserve. How could you be exporting gold and having the gold back in your currency? You're allowing your brain to malfunction. The brain is a problem-solving mechanism. That makes no sense. You cannot be exporting gold and diamond and have none in reserve. And we know, based on economics, that what you call paper money is an illusion. It is defined as fiat money, where the value placed on the money is less than the intrinsic value of the thing it is placed on. If it wouldn't make any sense. What we want they call full-bodied money. Full-bodied money is the thing where the value, the face value is equal to the intrinsic value, which is gold and diamond. So while you're holding on to illusion paper, US currency, and giving away your gold and diamond, virgin slavery done here. Indentureship finished as ready as well. You know what I mean? Do not allow the same people who permanently enslaved and also brought you as intentional laborers to still have you under economic enslavement. We have to be serious about this thing. Anyway, I want you to see the documentary, and then we can reason further. Because I think when we are all informed, yes, we can apply some critical thinking and then have a meaningful kind of discussion. Rastafari live, give thanks.
Protein and omega-3 content. Marijuana may well have been the first cultivated plant. There's speculation that Stone Age man may have used the wild herb to speed up his language skills. The use of new tools, new materials, cave art, and musical instruments. What created this sudden improvement? Some scientists propose that marijuana could have opened the door to greater consciousness in Mesolithic man. New research suggests that the early humans who regularly consumed cannabis may have enhanced their brain functions and might have possibly triggered a great leap forward. But that's all conjecture. What we do know is that cannabis is still inspiring new discoveries and a deeper understanding of the nature of health and disease.
This group of chemicals has significant anti-tumor
So
properties.
cannabis kill cancer cells in many cases.
If they have anti-tumor
There's
effects,
nothing else that impacts on so many of our illnesses.
we know that it kills cancer cells without hurting the non-transformed cells.
In recent years, the hemp plant has been proven to be anti-inflammatory, antispasmodic, and antibacterial. It can treat depression, traumatic stress syndrome, chronic pain, glaucoma, migraines, multiple sclerosis, Tourette's, nausea, and a host of other ailments without the unwanted side effects of pharmaceutical drugs. Historical evidence shows that the holy anointing oil used by Old Testament Hebrews contained cannabis extract. The early Christians used cannabis as part of their baptismal process. In the 1800s, medical journals published more than 100 articles on the therapeutic use of the drug, then known as cannabis indica or Indian hemp. Cannabis was often prescribed by doctors and was part of every medical bag right through the early part of the century. It was a popular treatment for labor pains, asthma, rheumatism, and nervous disorders. It was even given to cranky babies to get them to stop crying. Queen Victoria, who lent her name to the repressive Victorian era, was also a bit of a pothead. The Queen found that cannabis was the only remedy that helped her painful menstrual cramps. Titania could rule the waves a lot easier when she was high. But then the dark days for pot began in the early part of the 20th century, with the advent of chemically created drugs and an emerging profit-driven assembly line medical system. The new order didn't want competition, and cannabis was still preferred by many patients and doctors to the new miracle drugs, which were composed mainly of unnatural toxic substances. After lobbying by the pharmaceutical industry and fear-mongering misinformation by their donation-dependent allies in Congress, a federal law was passed in 1937 that prohibited doctors from prescribing pot in any circumstances under threat of prosecution, even though it was strongly opposed by the American Medical Association of its day. All cannabis products were removed from the U.S. Pharmacopoeia and the National Formulary by 1942. After alcohol was re-legalized, rather than go out of business, the massive bureaucracy of prohibition turned its operation to marijuana eradication.
It was Harry Anslinger, who was a racist, who was the head of the Federal Narcotics Bureau. He had been a prohibitionist, and then when Prohibition ended, they gave him a new job, and he was in every president's government from Roosevelt to Kennedy. Harry Anslinger was concerned that the use of marijuana by Black and Latino jazz musicians was going to lead to increased crime and increased mental illness in the United States.
The Treasury Department intends to pursue a relentless warfare against the despicable, dope-peddling culture who preys on the weakness of its government.
This war on cannabis lasted until just a few years ago, when states started passing their own medical marijuana initiatives in order to once again provide pot safely to patients. California was the first U.S. state to pass a medical marijuana law in 1996. The intent was to give relief to patients suffering from chronic pain, AIDS, cancer, and other illnesses. Since 1996, 13 other American states have passed similar compassionate use laws. 12 more have ballot measures or legislation pending. Although cannabis smoke has been shown to have precancerous effects in animal tissue, countless studies have failed to find a link between cannabis smoking and cancer, and in fact have shown that heavy marijuana users have considerably fewer cancers than the general population.
Dr. Donald Tashkin is a very good researcher at UCLA. He is a pulmonologist. His research demonstrated that the incidence of lung cancer in people who smoke cannabis was less than the incidence of lung cancer in people who smoke nothing at all.
We actually succeeded in studying about 600 lung cancer cases, about 600 head and neck cancer cases, and the bottom line is we failed to find any positive association between marijuana, even heavy marijuana use, which we define as more than 10 joint years, even if you look at more than 60 joint years of joint a day, times the number of joint smoke, we could not see an association. So I think it's really essentially a negative study. We failed to find any positive association with cancer.
Is it possible that the tar in smoked pot could be causing malignancies, while the chemical constituents in pot are curing them at the same time? Although there's some concern that marijuana can exacerbate schizophrenia and psychosis in a few patients already suffering from these diseases, recent extensive studies in the UK have failed to support a causal relationship between marijuana and mental disorders.
Many of the people who are sort of phobic about marijuana say that it leads to schizophrenia. And I think what we really know is that's not the case, that adolescents who seem to have a bit of a thought disorder, perhaps pre-schizophrenia, find that smoking marijuana helps their thought disorder, and therefore you have more people who are schizophrenic who found that they can self-medicate with marijuana, and they smoke marijuana. It's not that marijuana is causing the schizophrenia, it's that these people have discovered this as a potential therapy for their disorder.
It was only in the 1960s that fat-soluble THC was isolated from pot plants and declared the substance that got us high.
These substances in the cannabis plant which are active are kind of fatty-like, lipid-like, and they're hard to work with. So it has been very hard for chemists to get a handle on these kind of substances. Therefore, it took until 1964 for Raphael Sholem and his colleague Edry to discover the active compound in the cannabis plant, which they called then delta-9-tetrahydrocannabinol, or as we know it, THC.
The compound that we isolated in 1964, tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, has been looked into in great depth. And indeed, for the next 20 years, people got to know a lot about the chemistry, a lot about the clinical effects, a lot about the biochemistry of THC. One thing was still unknown 20 years later, and I'm speaking now since 1964 till the mid-80s. Nothing was known about the mechanism. How does THC act in the body?
Cannabis can affect memory and movement, but only temporarily. Though there have been reports of pot's negative effects on the heart and cardiovascular system, they are rare and not scientifically substantiated. Research has also shown that past claims of brain damage from cannabis fail to hold up under scientific scrutiny. All in all, cannabis is very low risk. The long history of the human use of cannabis also attests to its safety. Nearly 5,000 years without a single documented death. Medical marijuana dispensaries across America are now offering an impressive array of cannabis-enhanced foods, which makes it easier to over-medicate with marijuana edibles. But even so, they are never toxic or lethal, and the symptoms will disappear within a few hours.
scope and dosage, the green label or single strength, the red or triple.
See, when I've eaten stuff before, it just does make me tired.
I wonder if
These
it's
you wouldn't need that much of them.
You wouldn't need a whole
No,
lot.
no, and
Have you tried
yeah,
those?
I have. I had one little nibble and that was plenty.
Well, you can eat 4 cookies, you can eat 6 cookies. I mean, listen, you're gonna end up falling asleep. You can't OD from it, it's impossible. You're not gonna die from it. That's not gonna happen. I've tried. For marijuana, you'd have to smoke 1,500 pounds within 15 minutes, and any resulting death would likely be from asphyxiation. Dozens of major studies have been published in the last few years that indicate that the chemicals in cannabis, in the lab and in animals, have a significant effect on fighting almost all major cancers, including brain, breast, prostate, lung, thyroid, colon, skin, pituitary, melanoma, and leukemia cancers. They do this by promoting the death of cancer cells that have forgotten how to die, as well as a reduction in their crucial blood supply, while leaving healthy cells untouched. But why, you may wonder, would cannabis have any effect on cancer? The answer can be explained in one word: endocannabinoids. Amazing as it sounds, we're all born with a form of cannabis already in our bodies. It's called the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system, or ECS, influences multiple physiological processes. This intricate system modulates energy intake as well as nutrient transport, metabolism, and storage. A completely natural collection of compounds, endocannabinoids are our body's own form of marijuana and are involved in most of our cells and structures. They control a variety of functions in the nervous system, heart, reproductive, and immune systems. Endocannabinoid messengers help the cells communicate. Typically, they protect our good cells while killing the bad ones, like cancer cells. In all animals, the nervous system is made of the same components, large numbers of nerve cells carrying electrical signals. And wherever the cells meet, these signals are passed to a receptor in the next cell by a chemical messenger called a neurotransmitter. Inside the brain, there are different types of neurotransmitters, including dopamine and serotonin. All animals, from rodents to fish to elephants to humans, have inherited this basic structure. But hundreds of millions of years ago, the sea squirt and other primitive invertebrates evolved an innovation to this system.
What happened was the nervous system acquired a new chemical, if you like, that had a new flavor, a new type of chemical, and it's this chemical that is related in structure or a similar shape to the chemical that's found in cannabis.
Because of this similarity, these new signals came to be known as cannabinoids. It was inevitable that eventually cannabis would meet its perfect partner: us. Whether you like it or not, each and every one of us is fundamentally wired to respond to cannabis.
Now, receptors are not built in our brain or anywhere in our body, of course, animal bodies, because there is a plant out there that will produce a compound that acts on them. That just doesn't work that way. Receptors are found in our body because we produce compound that will activate those receptors. So obviously we thought that there should be endogenous compounds which act on those receptors. The fact that there is a plant compound, the tetrahydrocannabinol, the THC, which acts on those receptors, is just a work of nature.